Thanks a lot, Bradley. That was what a great session, and I think it resonates and it connects with a lot of the other comments that were made in previous panels about innovation at scale. But we've got to work together. We've got to work systematically. I like the comment, by the way, that was made at the end by Randolph, and it's nice to see sort of the excitement and sort of the on what's happening in the actual industry as well, which is good because it's easy to get a bit thrown with everything. I'm delighted to be joined by Layla Sawyer, who's Secretary General, who was brilliant on that panel, Secretary General for Current. So thank you very much, Layla, for joining me for closing remarks. And I'd like to probably ask you a couple of questions, really following on from that
Thanks,
panel, actually,
Adam.
because yeah, thank you for joining. Sorry, how are you doing, Layla, by the way? You okay?
Yeah, good. No, was I enjoyed the discussion. Was a good group.
It was a good group. It was a mix of a real mix of people as well. So, um, what are we looking at later in terms of innovation? Because obviously there's a lot of conversations going over the last couple of days about innovation, technology, decarbonisation. What kind of innovation is needed, do you think, in order to achieve Europe's decarbonisation goals?
Well, we touched on some of the on some of the innovations needed, indeed. Well, in this last session, and as you said, throughout the conferences, I haven't been able to attend all of the sessions. Um, So basically, what we need is we need to use all the possible solutions that are in our toolbox.
Mm.
What we see now is a lot of things are being experimented with, are being tried with, but also a lot of things that are considered innovative are actually already have been quite tried and tested in different settings. So when we see what kind of innovation is needed, I think the actual innovating is going very well, but then the taking it up is going too slow. So there are a lot of publications or references out there um, that list all these technologies that are being developed and what their readiness level is. You know, are they just being trialed? Like you have ENSOE, the European system operators, their Technopedia, which has
Mm.
case studies and how ready is the technology to be deployed on a commercial scale. But yet we still see that it's not always happening. So we really need
Mm.
to use all of these solutions and to learn from each other in that way as well. So to not everybody try and reinvent the wheel themselves.
Yeah, and to follow on from that, what's going well and what's not going so well? Because there's things that are doing well, but there's also things that are not doing. I mean, you mentioned about people want to do it, but they're not implementing it. So, what other things do you think are sort of doing well and not doing well?
Well, I think what's going well is that as collectively as a society, we are maybe too late, some would say, but better late than never. Waking up to what it is that needs to happen. So
Yeah.
there is a huge political will at the moment, in Europe, and I'm sure in the UK as well, especially with wanting to phase out Russian fossil fuels, that all of a sudden a lot of us in the industry have been saying, okay, we need to speed up, we need to speed up. And I feel like finally there is a critical mass that everyone also wants to speed up. Um, but then what is not going so well is, of course, how fast this is happening. And I think the IPCC recently has said that we have 3 years left to implement all of these changes. So
Mm.
for example, we need to look at what are the things that can be done in the short term. So there are, in order to increase our grids, we to incorporate renewable energy, we will need to build out new grids. But there are a lot of solutions that can be implemented already in the short term to help us to use our grids as optimally as possible. So
Mm,
if we look at in the last panel, we discussed a lot about what consumers can do, smart charging, flexibility. That's a huge important part. Other important parts, which is the technologies in our company and then in our organization we represent, which looks at how we can use the network as efficiently as possible. So if we look at
mm,
like something like dynamic line rating, where you're using sensors or using weather information to see in real time how much electricity can be transported over the lines, then we can actually already often use with our existing infrastructure use a lot more than we think. So this is
mm,
one technology, but we can also use power flow control systems that just can all these to optimize and use our energy system as efficiently as possible. And the good thing about these technologies is that they can also be implemented more quickly. So that can
mm,
actually buy us time to figure out what we're going to do in the long term, and where do we need to build new grids. A few weeks ago, the UK and a few other countries, or in the Netherlands and a few other countries, looked at how to use the North Sea, use
mm.
energy islands, hydrogen, etc. These are all huge plans that are going to take some time. So in the meantime, what can we already do to implement now, is a huge value, because it gives us the time to figure out what we need to do.
What can we do though? I mean, finally, I wanted to probably cover because we you talk about this, and I sort of read a lot about what's happening in the North Sea last week, actually, and what they're trying to do investment wise. It's fantastic. All of this is fantastic. Um, and innovation, I think, is fantastic. But what do you think we can do to speed up innovation? Because I feel we're in a bit of a holding pattern with what we want to achieve and what is actually achievable, if that makes sense. So, what do you think we
Yeah.
should do to actually speed up the innovation process?
Yeah, indeed. So nobody is against speeding up innovation. So it's a very easy thing to be in favor of. Um, But if we look at what we can actually do, especially when looking at the grids, we do need supportive legislation and regulations. So, for example, right now, innovation is often not incentivized at all for network operators. Their main, as a monopoly, their main income is based on the capex investments that they make, as opposed to using the grid as efficiently. I
Mm,
know in the UK you do have a kind of a TOTEX approach, where you get rewarded for using the grid more efficiently. In
mm,
most European countries, that is much less the case. So that means that actually we need to really align the incentives for TSOs and DSOs with this innovation, so
mm,
that it actually works in their favor to use technologies that maybe make the overall cost for the system less, but maybe it will make their OPEX costs higher than they were before. So as long as that
mm.
is not incentivized, we're going to be, yeah, pushing the ball uphill, so to speak. So that is one thing, but then also to look at the efficient, when we look at the future solutions, how to make those as efficient as possible. So that is also something we can already start thinking about now.
Yeah, it's a good. It's I mean these are great comments, Layla, because it's fantastic to get your perspective because of the position that you hold within Current as well. You're so connected with the industry on a senior level, and I think it's so true. We need to probably engage more the consumers, the customers. That's a big process because there's a lot of trust issues on data and sort of how this is going to work to save energy. You're right about rewarding on green energy and not using the grid. I think that needs to be a bit more expansive, and how that's being used Europe wide, because that will help. But long way to go. But I think it's progress. And thank you, Layla. Thank you so much for joining me for closing remarks. I love this, and I love the closing panel as well with you. So I hope you enjoyed it, and we really hope to speak to you again very soon as well.
Thanks, Adam, and thanks and congratulations on a successful conference.
Thanks a lot, Layla. Thank you very much. It's interesting because I think there's so many touch points about this event. What we covered from beginning to end, and it was good to finish on that note. I think what I probably would take away from the event is the significant and increasing role of the consumer. I think more so than anything else. And I mentioned this obviously now to Layla, but I think it's paramount now. I think the way in which the energy networks are going and the whole future energy systems ecosystem is going, that is going to be a significant relationship that needs to be managed. And I think as consumers, being more aware of how we spend our energy and how we contribute to net zero goals, I think networks are going to work more and more with them. So, and obviously then with that comes data, with that comes technology, with technology comes upgrade and change management and people management. So we're going through clearly a ginormous transition here. I think Laura Sands mentioned earlier, it's not a transition, it's a transformation. And it is a transformation because, if you take on board pretty much every discussion that we've had, I mean, these are big changes that networks are going to have to make. So it's exciting, and I think it's very exciting, like Randolph mentioned in the final panel. But it needs a lot of work, and we have such short-term goals to achieve net zero 2035 and 2050, that are we going to achieve this in such a short space of time with the technology we have to offer? But as I mentioned in my opening speech, I mentioned it today, I think I do stand by that. I think with technology comes optimism. I do believe that, because as technology evolves, as technology really develops, we will accelerate energy transition goals. And I think companies will become more aware of this as well. But I think everyone's thinking in the same direction. There wasn't really many opposing views about what people were thinking. There was a lot of agreeing, and a lot of people talking about collaboration, which I think is really important. I think that's the only way the industry is going to move on. We heard it yesterday. You're not going to rely on one company to get us out and get us out of this. Not one technology company. There's not going to be one network to get us out of this. It's going to be a collective effort, and that's going to really take a bit of time. But I think we'll get there sooner if we collaborate as we would. So thank you very much for joining us over the last couple of days. I've really enjoyed it. I've really found it fascinating because I love this industry. I find it very current at the moment. It's in the news so often, and I'm keen to see what the next stage is for when we do the event next time. So we'll keep you posted on when we do some new work for future energy systems. Please give me any feedback you have on the event, what you enjoyed, what you liked, what you found interesting. That's always very good for us to hear. And until next time, I wish you a fantastic evening, and I wish you a good day. Thank you very much.